Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. This morning I'm looking at a book which has come to us from LexisNexis. It's part of the Butterworths series of titles that they produce. And this one we've looked at before. It's part of a range of handbooks which LexisNexis publish. We do see them in court on a regular basis. The purpose of these reviews is to identify which books are extremely useful for practitioners such as myself, what we actually see in court, and the value of the books at the moment for a particular case that you might have on instructions. This particular review anyway is about the Butterworths Employment Law Handbook for 2015. It's now in its 23rd edition and it's been edited by Peter Wallington, Queen's Counsel. We have produced reviews on the web and in the journals, and this video clip is to go with those. My wife Elizabeth and I wrote this review, and we've given it a title, a must-have for employment lawyers. The latest edition of Butterworth's Employment Law Handbook is out now. So that's a bit of advertising out of the way. Let's have a look at the book. It's a heavy one actually, and it's a paperback. Green cover, there's the front, and there's the spine, and you can see it's got 2015 on it. Then on the back you've got quite a lot of detail about what's actually in the book, and you will notice shaded areas. It's a paperback, as I say. The paper is actually nice and strong. The shaded areas are useful because they show you the legislation, the various statutory instruments, then various EU materials, and then you've got codes of practice and so forth. There is an inside back cover with some information on it there, and the front also has an inside front cover, some information, and also the stuff. The paper does appear to be a bit flimsy, as is the case with quite a lot of these publications which go into a lot of detail. There's the basic information about the book there, and then there's an editor's introduction which Mr. Wallington has produced, really talking about what's new. That's dated the 8th of June 2015, and I'm recording this in the autumn of 2015, or the beginning of the autumn, at the end of September. The book runs to something approaching under 3,000 pages. It's got 2,800 odd. That's the index, which you can see, very detailed index at the back. And then after that you have things like useful addresses, all the usual sort of stuff that you'd be looking for. And you've got things like miscellaneous materials at the back, forms, that sort of information. Now at the front of the book, let's just go into the book itself and have a look at what we've got, because the actual, after the introduction, you've then got the contents section. Again, you can cross-refer to the back of the book, but the actual statutes are by paragraph numbering, not page numbering, although you should be able to find stuff pretty easily, and I'll show you that in a minute. You can see the alphabetic list and contents as well. Then the same thing for statutory instruments. Then after that, again, a lot of statutory instruments, of course, for this area of practice. Then you do have European Union materials. This is coming in on a much bigger scale now, a lot of law books. And then regulations, directives and recommendations. And then at the back you've got the codes of practice, and you've got Home Office guidelines, and a whole range of other miscellaneous materials. Then you do have some practice directions right at the back for the Employment Appeal Tribunal if you're going slightly higher. Then we've got the actual book itself, and there it is. That's the first Act of Parliament, and you see the numbering there on the top. It's on the top right hand side, and if you go through you can again see that that is how you find the pages. You do have page numbers, but that of course does assist with the finding of things, and there are obviously a lot of notes to go, explanatory notes to go with the legislation itself. Then we get into the main stuff. This is the Employment Relations Act 1999, blacklists for instance. Then going forward, or rather back, well forward in the book, towards the back of the book, this is then the statutory instruments section. huge amount there. Then there's, for instance, you've got another thing here, statutory codes of practice, ACAS guide and so forth. So it's all in all a very, very important book. As I say, it's a paperback. It is a book we see regularly in the court. It's a heavy book, and it's one that I certainly feel it's important to get some knowledge about the way round how to find things in the book. You do have, of course, excellent publications like the Legal Action Group Employment Law Advisors Handbook, which is a much simpler book to follow because that will deal specifically with the problems. But this is the fountain of knowledge, if you like, in terms of where to find things, because this is, if you have a legal argument with in a particular court or tribunal, this is where you will find the information. So this is what we say about the book. This is the latest edition of that long established and indispensable work of reference to employment law, the Butterworths Employment Law Handbook, and it's a series. They do a series on other substantive law areas. If you're a practitioner either specialising in employment law or intending to, this annually published handbook provides in one hefty yet convenient volume all the materials you'll need to advise or represent clients in tribunals. And as I've said, you will see this in the courts and tribunals. It's around as a book. Like the other 17 or so titles then in the Butterworths Handbook series from LexisNexis, it provides a one-stop shop of primary source materials, all of which apply equally to England and Wales and Scotland, but of course not to Northern Ireland, which is separate. Certainly it's a reliable source of statutory, non-statutory and European materials. It's all in one place, as I've said, and it can be referred to quite justifiably as the Bible of employment law. And as employment law as a specialism requires continuing attention to new developments, we feel that this new edition, which contains these significant changes that have taken place in the past 12 months, is the ideal update for practitioners. As the editor, Peter Wallington, Queen's Counsel, remarks, the bulk of the new material included this year has been generated by a tsunami of subordinate legislation, putting the flesh on the new rights to shared parental leave and pay, the enabling provisions for which derive from the Children and Families Act 2014. I would say that this is a book for 2015, but we will of course be having some legislation by the new majority Conservative government, so there will be some big changes, I suspect, on the way. Now, other new developments for this edition, which is really the knock-on effect of what we had with the coalition government, are also too numerous to mention here, but they concern, for example, such issues as new provisions in the Employment Tribunals Act, financial penalties for failure to pay settlements, 0 hours contract, a very big political topic, of course, unpaid holiday pay, the relevant provisions of the Small Business Enterprise and Employment Act 2015, and of course much more, including the National Minimum Wage Regulations 2015 as they currently stand. Fortunately then for the practitioner under pressure, the book, despite its bulk, is logically organised as I've shown you, and is written with clarity and designed for ease of use, with numbered paragraphs throughout. There's a detailed table of contents of no less than 18 pages, and if you still can't quite connect with what you're looking for, there's a detailed 50-page index at the back, which is very much the house style for Lexis, and it makes it pretty easy to find what you're looking for. You just need a bit of practice when it comes to the legal research element of it, because Lexis, like the Hallsbury's edition, they have their own structure, and you just need to know how to use it. Let me conclude by saying that it's important to note that the text of the materials in the handbook are fully up to date as at the general election of the 7th of May 2015, and further developments up to the end of May 2015, plus those with later commencement dates where they're known, have also been included in the text to make it as easy as possible. As I record this, I do not expect any further changes now until 2016 at the earliest, but at least we've got some idea of where we stand at the moment. So for employment lawyers, or indeed anyone advising on employment law, this latest edition of what's a highly regarded handbook is, I think, an essential purchase for you if that's your main area of practice. There's the book again. As I say, it is a paperback, and there's the back. The paper actually is quite strong. It's the same with Stones and the others. You can see when I'm pulling it that although it's very thin, it is nice and durable, so you shouldn't have too many problems. There's the Pensions Act 2008, which is set out there, and then, as I indicated before, statutory instruments, a very substantial section. Now this is TUPE regulations, which are covered there, but you can see when you look at the structure now of it with the shaded areas, the first bit is Acts of Parliament, then you've got statutory instruments, so you can see it has in fact expanded quite considerably. Well, thank you very much to Lexis, to Peter, and to everybody involved in this, because it's a first-class book, and as I've said on many occasions, we as practitioners cannot do our work properly without having this sort of material, so thank you to all for your continued help when we're actually dealing face to face with clients. I think this book will be of a limited use to litigants in person, but there again, in this day and age, we have many more, and they will certainly need to know of the existence of this book. Thank you to all. Bye bye.